to the Relational Lives podcast. I'm Ali.
And I'm Roz.
And we're both psychotherapists.
This is a podcast about the relationship we have with others and the one we have with ourselves.
We cover many topics related to mental well-being and relationships.
We would really appreciate if you give us a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. This helps get the word out there so more people can access this free resource.
And we enjoy engaging with our listeners, so please share your thoughts in the comments or email us at relationallives@gmail.com. We hope you enjoy the show. You've probably heard of the word triggered. It's quite an overused term these days, triggered or activated, we sometimes call it. And today's episode is all about being triggered, what it is, where it comes from, and how we can help ourselves with that. Everybody will benefit from this. Every human on the planet will sometimes be triggered, and it will affect relationships, yourself. So do stay tuned. We've got our actually 4 today takeaway tips at the end, where we're going to help you figure out how to do this better, how to do it differently. Shall we start by actually explaining what we're talking about here with the word triggered?
Might be helpful.
Mm.
Bearing in mind we're doing an episode on it.
On about?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So it's when basically there's a sort of disproportionate reaction to something, isn't there? And how we can be perhaps overly reactive when something has happened. Or underreactive. But inside, I think we probably, even when we're underreactive, feeling something going on. Wouldn't you think? Or do you think
not
some people
necessarily?
don't at all?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think some people will have this ability to shut down and not feel anything. So it's this kind of, the experience of feeling like you have in some way either overreacted to a situation or underreacted in an emotional way. I think that would be a way of describing it.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of what you're saying, I guess the body inside is feeling something of threat in the mix. Whether somebody shuts down or somebody overreacts, there's an experience, I guess, that something within ourselves, somewhere or outside of ourselves, we are being threatened.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It's something that's being perceived as a threat, and there's a reaction to that threat. And it's often rooted in the past. Mm-hmm. So you're not actually reacting, are you, to whatever's happening in that moment? You're reacting to what's happening in the moment and what's happened in the past as well. Yeah.
I think it's really helpful sometimes, isn't it, to look at it as a sort of, I say sometimes to clients about this sort of 10-90, which is helpful when, there is something probably in the present. There's that 10% that's happening in the present. But in terms of the proportionate reaction, it's the 90 is the bit that's coming from the past. There's some kind of sense or reminder of something that our body, our being is remembering, and then we react, which then can seem disproportionate, either the shutting down disproportionately, I guess, or the reaction, the overreaction, disproportionate to what the thing is in the present.
That's a really good way of looking at it. And I guess that percentage could be different depending on what's going on, couldn't it?
Yeah.
It could be a 1% is in the now and a 99% is in the past, or a 50%. Yeah, I've never really thought of it like that.
And so I think that can be really helpful to be able to tune into ourselves to see what it is. Is this really, why am I feeling and why am I reacting to this, or why am I shutting down in this situation? How much is to do with what's going on? Because I think it's really important not to discount what is going on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not that nothing is going on in the present. Nothing has been worthy of some kind of reaction in the present, but it's how much of that, isn't it? And maybe if it's helpful for people listening now, is for us to think about how might people recognize that they're being triggered? What might they notice in themselves that tell them okay, this is a response that's maybe somehow rooted in past experiences and not necessarily about what's going on right now.
Well, I think one of the things I can speak from my experience is I can be defensive. Um, so I think that if I experience I'm being criticized in some way, I can then react. I kind of feel something inside me actually, and I know I can become more defensive.
Mm.
So that's a way that it shows up for me is when I'm being defensive.
And
I know I'm probably.
what would you notice in yourself in that being defensive? What kinds of things would you notice your thoughts being defensive? Would you likely notice
I think it's
your
more my behaviors. I think
okay.
it's what I would be saying. I would be perhaps a bit short and sharp. I would be defending myself because, as we'll kind of gather with where these things come from, I think that, I can feel inside somehow not good enough, maybe.
Mm.
And then when I don't feel good enough and I'm hearing a sort of something which might not even be a criticism, but I'm taking it in as if it is,
Yeah.
I can then respond in a way that's trying to kind of defend my not good enough feeling to try and feel okay.
Mm. So your trigger response, your reaction to the trigger being somehow feeling like you're criticized, even if you're not,
Mm-hmm.
the reaction would be you noticing your defensiveness.
Mm-hmm. I think I'd probably notice if I slowed myself down, which I
Mm.
don't think is easy to do in those situations when you're triggered.
Mm.
But if I'm on thinking about it now, and if I slow myself down, I would feel something physically
Okay.
inside. I would feel a sort of sensation inside of
Yeah.
something which kind of indicates threat. And I think this is what can happen is we can go to this sort of fight, flight, freeze,
Mm.
fawn, sort of appeasing kind of response. But certainly I think I can be defensive. And I think that can happen for me because I was thinking about this before, coming on to talk about this today for us both. But when I even don't know somebody, so I've had a situation, for instance, where there's been a sort of road ragey type thing where
Mm.
somebody has been aggressive
Yeah.
and I will really get on my high horse. I will
Mm.
kind of, it's almost like I can feel my hackles coming up, and I want to defend. Like, how could it's almost like a rudeness to me that they've been so rude in that interaction on the road.
Does that, yeah, well, they probably have been then. So,
Well,
because
they
that's, I suppose,
have.
this percentage thing, isn't it? Yes, they've been rude and actually aggressive to you, whether
Yeah,
that be
yeah.
a middle finger up to you or you're yelling through the window. And some of that response that you're having is going to be very valid.
It is. However, I think that what I notice within myself is I can hold on to it.
Mm.
That's one thing. It's like I'm kind of, oh God, I guess what happened to me today? Kind of I can hold on to that. But also somehow it's a really strange thing, but sometimes I can feel like I'm in the wrong. It's like
Mm.
this feeling like I'm in the wrong, which I'm not. I'm not in that instance. But my
Okay. So
but
that's
my
another example of
reaction, yeah. But my
feeling criticised.
reaction, yeah. But my reaction can be um over the top.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what people might recognize in themselves, I think, isn't it? The reaction is disproportionate, over the top compared to the thing. And another person in that example that you've given with someone having road rage, another person might have that reaction in them and stop the car, pull over, get out, yell at them.
Mm-hmm.
They might have more of an angry behavioral response to it.
Response. Yeah, for sure.
And
What
another
about you?
person,
Oh,
well,
sorry, go
if
on.
I use that example, I will feel it. I mean, I think there was one fairly recently and I can really feel it. Like my body feels like,
Yeah.
I can like, and it feels quite intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I try and shove it down. And then I might have stories playing out in my mind about what's happened. I might ruminate on it for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about, what
Yeah.
happened? Did I do anything wrong? Are they, I'll just play over, think about all the different scenarios if I let it run through, which I try not to. But that's another example. If someone's caught in their thinking and creating stories in the mind, that might be another sign that there's been some kind of trigger reaction.
Yeah, and I think that probably is part, an element of that happens to me in terms of what goes through my head, particularly afterwards. But I think I probably say it, and maybe some thoughts going on. But I think my reaction would be different to yours. My behavioural reaction would be different to yours. I wouldn't push it down. I would feel like it was coming out, and that in itself can sometimes feel a little bit out of control.
Okay.
So I think that's another sign. It's like this feeling like I've lost my adult part, actually.
Mm.
And that's, I think, what it can feel like is it's a sort of childlike almost sometimes reaction when we are triggered.
Some people describe it as a regression. I don't particularly like that phrase.
No.
Because it's almost like, well, you've gone back to childhood. And you have, in a way, gone back to some kind of feelings from there. But you can feel quite young, can't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, we've got expressions, haven't we, where I think to be the person, so if I were triggered, say, by my husband, and I was feeling that
You would
whatever
never
was
be
going,
triggered by your husband, surely.
no, never. No, very rarely happens. I'm going to have to stretch my imagination and my memory to remember this. No, we trigger. I'm sure we're triggering each other. In all relationships, I think we're triggering each other a lot. This is why we talk about, don't we, the sort of negative cycle in our therapy work, that in a way the negative cycle is often, it's what it started with is a trigger. Something has activated something that this goes on between us. So when, actually, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say about my husband.
Your husband triggering the hell out of you.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I was thinking about what it's like for the other person as well.
Mm.
So supposing he says something which I take in as criticism, and he didn't intend it as criticism, and then I become defensive. And then he might say something which is really unhelpful in that moment. He might then say, all right, I wasn't, or something like, I'll just stop talking or something, so he'll say something which is kind of his defense from my response. So he can become triggered from my overreaction. And then we can kind of get tangled up in this thing.
I think it's Gabor Mate describes it as like having explosives ready in the body, waiting to be lit by something. Or you could describe it as a landmine that's just sitting there underneath the surface of the ground, quite safe until someone treads on it, and then the explosion happens. And that explosion can be detrimental to ourselves and others around us, can't it?
It can. And that sort of out of the blueness, that suddenness, I think, can then throw everything up. Everything can seem okay and be okay. And then suddenly something changes, which again, I think brings in the disproportionate thing, that the over or under, but the under, when you're talking about the underreaction, that you don't think necessarily people are feeling it.
I say that because sometimes I have that experience where something can happen that other people, I know it's big, I know it's something that I would understand people having a reaction to, but I don't.
Is it that you don't have a reaction? I was going to say, so you feel
I've done it
nothing.
Before. Yeah, I've done it before where I have had this happen and I thought, okay, this is quite big. This should be something I feel on. Am I either not connected to my body and not feeling it, or am I literally not feeling it? And I checked my watch, which has got my heart rate on it, and my heart rate had gone down.
How interesting.
So that's that shutdown.
So
response.
everything. So that's effectively coming into freeze, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we're thinking of those threat responses, so your threat response, so I think it's important to remember that it's still a threat response.
Mm-hmm.
There is still a threat there.
Mm.
But that freeze, that sort of what was, once playing dead for the saber-toothed tiger coming around the mountain, is still a response to protecting yourself from something that is awful that is happening.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you know it in your head. You can see that this thing is happening.
I have the
You can-
thoughts, like, this is bad, this
Mhm.
is terrible, what's happened? Oh my God. I have the thoughts, but my body goes it goes into that freeze response.
And is there nothing in between that happens? There's not even a sniff of something that happens. It just is from
Not that
just
I'm
thinking
aware of.
and nothing. How interesting.
I mean, there might be a microsecond of something, but quite quickly it can go into that nothing,
And
hypo-activated.
yeah, and how long does it often take you to? Do you get to a place where you can move then to a more feeling state at any stage, or do you stay in that for a long period of
It can be
time?
quite a long time. And it can be quite frustrating
Mm-hmm.
because, what you're describing is sometimes for you, it can feel out of control, because you feel a lot and it feels like it has to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But the frustration for me is there's nothing. Like, I want some kind of energy.
Mm.
I want to show people that there's something happening for me, but I'm not feeling
Mm.
it. So I think that's
Mm.
really helpful for people to recognize, because some people might also experience this hypoactivation.
Mm-hmm. So going into freeze rather than going into fight or flight.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting, isn't it?
And the stories will still be playing out. The thoughts in the mind will still be there. The whole kind of, telling yourself what this is all about, what's happened, not this isn't this terrible, but the feelings, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on a little bit, because I think there's something very common in this example of WhatsApp groups or any kind of chat group online, particularly WhatsApp groups, I think, where I think a common experience of a trigger is when someone feels like they're left out of that WhatsApp conversation. You might have posted something on the group, a question, or just a comment, or a funny thing, or a funny meme, and nobody responds.
Mm.
Nothing. There may be 10, 20, 50 people on this group, not a whisper of a response.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're listening, watching now, have a think about how you respond to that if that happens to you, it is common.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is
Yeah.
an example, isn't it, of, go on.
No. Let's carry on.
Well, this is an example of where there could be past experiences within you, within us, often from school, of feeling not belonging, or not a part of something, or different something.
Or bullied.
Or bullied, yeah. Anything where that kind of similar thread is in there.
Mm.
And then it's happening in the now, in a WhatsApp group, which can bring alive all that feeling of, oh my God, I still don't belong.
Yeah. I think that can also happen in not just in groups on the telephone, as it were. I think it can also happen in reality in terms of friendship
yeah.
groups. I think that when somebody isn't invited, or there's a party or whatever, and you notice that everybody else is going and you're not, or that sort of exclusion, isn't it? It's excluding. And when you're excluded, like you say, what does that remind you of? What does that take you to? What do you tell yourself?
Mm.
If you are feeling something of an activation from that, rather than being in sort of an unactivated state where you can just say, oh, that's great, they're having a good time, they're just choosing that they're doing that, it's not about me, it's not a personal thing that we're taking it as.
Yeah. I suppose I use WhatsApp groups because they're so common, and it's so easy for someone to not respond in a WhatsApp group. It's so easy to have that silence.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens in real life as well. Yeah. So a non-triggered response, like you said, might be, oh, well, what, that meme isn't funny, or people are busy,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they don't want to hear, but it's not that strength of feeling.
Yeah. Or even
That,
they missed the message. So let's have a think about where this comes from, Ellie. We've talked a bit, haven't we, about our, this sort of percentage of 90-10 or whatever it might be. And we've sort of indicated that there's our history can impact how we react in the present.
yeah. Yeah. Shall we give some examples of the kinds of things we might experience, or the kinds of things we've heard from people about the history and how it can result in this, I guess, landmine just sitting, waiting to be trodden on and triggered? Well, there's upbringing, isn't there? There's how you are parented.
If you have
And
felt criticised, maybe. I mean, I think that's an area, isn't it? Because we can have all sorts of ways, again, going back to how we respond to it, the sort of jealousies that can come in, or all sorts of different emotions, can't they? So if we're criticised when we're brought up, that can obviously then potentially bring in something when we're criticised in the present.
if you've had parents who were quite strict, rigid, and criticised in order for you to try and get better, and it all, sometimes really good intentions, but results in a feeling of unresolved, I don't know, unresolved pain, I suppose, isn't it? That can just be reactivated.
I think that's a really good way of putting it, because that is exactly, in a way, what's happening, isn't it? It's something that's unresolved, and it is usually something that's painful, whether it's a belief about ourselves or the world, and then how that is being activated in the present by something we see as if, or if it is happening in the present, that we then experience the same thing. I'm thinking about not just as we're saying about criticism, but about emotional unavailability. So if somebody's unavailable, and I think this is somewhere where I can feel triggered, as if I'm not feeling like I'm being listened to. And I can see somebody's distracted or not really taking it, so I can then go to a place where I feel like what I'm saying isn't very important.
Okay. Yeah. And I think there's elements of CBT or EMDR, or most therapies actually have this idea of this negative belief or negative view of yourself that can develop. And I guess the one you're talking about there is, I'm not important. The sense of I'm not important. Is that right?
Yeah, because that's what you're sort of seeing, is it? It's like I'm not the priority in this situation,
Yeah.
or it could feed into a not good enough, and I think it's like whatever this, or I'm too much. I think it can go into all sorts of different negative beliefs.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not good enough is a very common generic one, isn't it? That we notice. But yeah, that's that core sense of negative view of self, negative core belief is something that's quite helpful, I think, to know about yourself. What are your negative core beliefs, and how are they being activated in the present? Some common ones might be, like you said, I'm not interesting. I'm not important. Sorry, I'm boring. I don't belong. I'm stupid. I'm ugly. Those I'm stupid, I'm ugly, often they eventually go to therefore I'm unlovable.
And like you say, very, very common for people to experience these. And sometimes I think, they don't necessarily fully go, do they? This is the point, is
No,
that however much we work on ourselves,
no.
we can go through periods where everything's, hunky-dory, and then actually, and even do that deep work on ourselves. And then when we're in relationship with whomever, it can then be activated again. And sort of, we sometimes talk about raw spots, don't we, in our work, and that sort of raw spot being activated and bringing it up again, as if it's as horrible as it was when we felt it the very first time we sort of established that belief when we were younger.
That's a really good point. I don't think they ever fully go, no matter how much work you do. I don't think they ever fully go, but they can be less less frequently activated. And when they are activated, it becomes less intense. So it can really change quite a lot.
Yeah, it can. And also, I think what we learn in the work that we do on ourselves is that we can bring something different into the mix. So
Yeah.
that when we are activated, even if we are, we might be able to bring in more understanding, which I think is really key, and more self-compassion rather than condemn ourselves again, which kind of can keep that internal dialogue and cycle and story going for ourselves.
So what we're saying is that where the origins of what this trigger, the explosive in you, are likely to come from past experiences. It could be your upbringing with your parents. It could be your family dynamics. It could be school experiences are really common. Humiliation, embarrassment, bullying, changing schools, having to make friends, relationships, teenage years, all kinds of experiences can create this explosive inside you.
Exactly. So, that's why we will all experience this at some time or another, whether it's a kind of little tiny explosion, like we said, or something that's sort of much bigger. There's still something where it doesn't relate fully to what is going on in the present when we are feeling all these things, when we're
Yeah.
feeling a threat.
We're talking about that it can be less intense, it can happen less frequently. And the key to that happening is really understanding what your triggers are and where they might originate from. And therapy can help. I think things like EMDR, CBT, other psychotherapies, I mean, they're ones both of us do, can help to shift that core belief that you carry.
Mm-hmm.
And they can
Yeah.
really have a big impact on that.
Yeah. I always think that with my work, one of the main things I kind of consider as the most part of what I do is helping people find their self-worth.
Mm.
And if you think about that, that's the sort of the path that is taken to get that is by understanding and exploring and getting in touch with and recognizing and making sense of and feeling into all the sort of negative experiences, beliefs that we've established along the way. And we all gather things, don't we, along the way, however
Yeah.
much, however big or small they are. We see the world through a certain lens at times, and that can really reinforce these beliefs. And it therefore is not surprising that some of that past is coming into our present at times, and when we feel these activations going on, I just think it makes so much sense.
Mm.
It's kind of like, why wouldn't we react if we're telling ourselves this story or experiencing something in this way? Why wouldn't we react to it?
Yeah.
Whether that is shut down actually, or from your experience of it, or whether it's more outwardly reactive like me,
Mm.
or
Or any
and
other
anything in
kind of way. Yeah.
between.
So
Exactly.
people might turn to some kind of self-medicating strategy to not feel this stuff. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, eating, all kinds of ways that people can try and numb out these feelings.
Mm. Mm. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think that, sometimes it can get carried away in a way. I think from some of the descriptions that you used there, that we can not face things. We don't want to face it because it feels so hard or feels so threatening, or we feel that or think there's such a risk that we're going to lose something. Maybe even losing something of ourselves, which as well as who we're with, or the friendship, or the whatever it might be, the relationship. And I think that risk of looking into this stuff can feel hard. It can feel really difficult, can't it? But the understanding is so important.
Yeah, I think, you've got a really good point there. It can feel, any kind of self-reflection, self-exploration can feel really hard, especially if there's shame in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, I don't like myself. I don't like this part of me. Why would I want to look at it?
Mm-hmm. And particularly if it isn't a very unexpected external reaction, something, for instance, where we're filled with rage and we're saying things that we don't really mean and are sort of regrettable, but we cannot help ourselves. And I think then we can get so caught up in our reaction, and also from the person who's experiencing that they are then caught up in the reaction rather than seeing what's going on underneath.
Yeah. And that's why it's also really helpful, isn't it? If you're in a relationship, to, when you understand yourself, you can share it with your partner or friends. So they understand it too. And they understand that you're looking at it and you know it and you're addressing it.
Yeah.
That it's not intentional.
Yeah. And that understanding, I think what you're talking about is so important, is it's also both ways. And this is what we find in couple work, isn't it? Is that when we look at somebody's negative cycle and look at what's activating them and look at the stories they're telling themselves and the negative belief perhaps that's being reinforced in that once the partner also understands where that person's taking it, it gives them such a greater possibility for empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
So, shall we go to our top takeaway tips?
3 top takeaway tips.
So the first takeaway tip is, over the next week, notice when you might have been triggered. And I would suggest writing this down. So maybe in a journal or just on a piece of paper or on your phone. Notice when you might have been triggered, what the trigger experience was. So for the example, the WhatsApp group might be a good example of, just write WhatsApp group, ignored. And what you noticed in yourself, what the thoughts were, what the feelings were, if you had any feelings, and what the behavior was, how you reacted or wanted to react. So you're kind of starting to get a picture of what these triggers are and how it shows up.
So the next takeaway tip is see if you can kind of reflect on where this originates. We've spoken, haven't we, about our past experiences. So this might be in your childhood, it might be at schooling, with school, in your relationships. Just see if you can reflect on where you might have started to believe those things about yourself and felt these things. And the final one is, this is a really difficult one, because sometimes because of what we're feeling, it can be really hard to do. But just see if you can catch it. When you are feeling activated or triggered, just see if you can catch it. That might be that you catch it sometimes when it's happening, and it might be that you catch it when it's happened. But that noticing of it can then really take away the power of what's happened, and you can feel in yourself a little bit more separate from it and distant, so that you can see what is happening and perhaps bring in something then of compassion to yourself, to understand that there's a reason why you've reacted like you have.
And do let us know how you get on with this. We'd love to hear from you if you you can start to notice your triggers and where they come from and how that helps you.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully we won't go away and be triggered, Ali.
Yeah,
but if we do,
probably will.
We will know that we can do something about it.
Yeah. All right.
So
see you next
thanks,
time.
Ali. Look forward to it.